Thank you for joining me for another Infinite Woman interview. I'm your host, Hannah Marshall, and today we're talking to my beautiful friend, Fiona Steele, licensed marriage and family therapist, specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery for individual adults. So I'm just going to jump right into this. Hi, Fee. Thank you so much for being here.
Anna, thanks for having me. How fun.
I've been wanting to interview you for years, so I'm super excited. So we've known each other a long time. Side note, Fiona's husband, Tommy, was my boss in the art department of Capitol Records over 30 years ago. And you both are two of my very favorite people on the planet.
Oh, so
but
sweet.
Fee, it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I learned that your specialty in your therapy practice is dealing with people who've been in relationships with narcissists. And you and I both grew up with narcissistic family members. So did you start out with this as your specialty, or did your career evolve in that direction over time?
Well, I was licensed back in 1985. So I've been doing this a really long time. So nobody ever talked about, knew about, ever studied, or was, never came up in college that this existed even. What happened was that about, 15 years ago or so, maybe longer now, I started to notice that women that were coming in, actually men as well, were giving me the same kind of story over and over again about a family member or a partner or a boss or a friend who had these qualities. So I became very interested in it and knew from my experience that this meant that they must be narcissistic, or they could have a cluster, part of a cluster B personality disorder, which includes histrionics or borderline. None of them are very pleasant to live with, or to be in relationship with or work for. So I got really schooled in it. And I have to tell you, where it really took off, where people started to understand this, was when we had a narcissist in our government. I had people coming out of the woodwork saying, that's my father, or that's my mother, or that's my husband, or that's my friend.
So tell me about your own situation dealing with a narcissist, and how did you deal with it?
Okay, well, I had a narcissistic father, and he was very close-minded and had a certain way that he wanted me to be. And I was the fighter. I was the black sheep. I was the one that wouldn't put up with it. And so I was in trouble the most. So I had a firsthand, really, personal experience with this, which is why I could recognize it in other people and have put a name to it. How I dealt with it, I just kept fighting. I was very rebellious, and I had a sister who, I should explain these terms actually. My sister would have been what's called the golden child. My father loved her. She could do no wrong. Of course, she did everything he wanted. So she was very compliant, and it's such a little good girl, but she really had no sense of self outside of that. And there's four of us, but really it affected my sister and her twin brother, Joel, and I. And I was a black sheep and my brother was a black sheep. So it all got taken out on us. And I just kind of learned to live with it. I just kind of distanced myself. I would still sneak out and do things I shouldn't. And I was just really a bad kid, but
I can't even imagine.
But that's called the scapegoat, where that person gets blamed for everything in the family. And I think that it really helped me. I believe that scapegoats are stronger than golden children in the long run, because they've always fought for themselves and they've always known that something was off, and they still had that sense of, no, I'm important and I matter.
That is so interesting. And I love that you're defining the terms, because we have a golden child in my family too. And it used to be me, but things have evolved, but
And change, yeah.
yeah, but yeah, because the parents are gone, so dynamics change. But I had a narcissistic family member, and it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized what it was. And I think it was not long after that when we had lunch and we were talking about it, and you told me that this is what you do. I learned about it from Dr. Christiane Northrup. She had a program and a book, Dodging Energy Vampires. And I thought, oh, that's great, because I'm a giver. I'm a people pleaser. I've got the disease to please. I'm a nice girl. It's funny because I can kind of relate to your sister, but not in just the compliant way, but in the other way that my program addresses, overcoming nice girl syndrome. But I thought, oh, this is perfect. I need this. And so when I got the program and read the book, it was about narcissistic personality disorder, which I had never heard of before. And I was like, oh my God, like the light bulb went off, and I was like, this is that family member. It's been so enlightening, and it was so comforting knowing that you understood this and this is what you do. And well, I was going to ask this later, but I want to ask this now. Why is it important for someone who is in that kind of relationship to find a therapist like you who understands the characteristics and the qualities? Because if they come in together, it could do more harm to, let's say, the victim or the person who's being manipulated, or
Right.
the non-narcissist.
Right. Okay. As a marriage and family therapist, and I think this goes across the board for therapists, at least in California, our orientation is to try to help the relationship to stay together. And that's not always a good idea. And if you don't understand how insidious and stealth and secretive and sneaky and undermining a narcissist can be, then you're going to think there's ways by communication that you can help the relationship when it's not even good for that person to stay. I mean, if it's overt, like he's beating me, or he came after me and choked me, of course the therapist would say that this is not a good relationship, get out. But a lot of times it's very covert, the behavior, and it's mixed with being sweet and loving and gentle with the woman or the man in that case. There's usually, there's a way in which relationships, narcissistic relationships go, okay? So they start off with the guy usually finding a girl because they have really good radar. So they'll find a girl, or again, it's reversed. I don't mean to be just one-sided, but usually it's a guy. Okay, so they'll find somebody, and I'll just use that for purposes here. He'll find a girl who he can tell is insecure and who is kind of desperate and who talks a lot about themselves, and they're very open and very trusting and very sweet. They'll find people like that. They have like a second radar to find people like that, right? Yeah. So they'll hone in on somebody like that, and they'll do what's called love bombing. Okay. Texts me all day long, writes me letters, sent me flowers, takes me out, tells me I'm beautiful. It's been 3 weeks. He's talking about marriage. Really, when a relationship, this is a big red flag. When a relationship gets rushed along and you're talking about marriage after a month or so, you're probably with a narcissist.
Yeah.
So then the person comes into the relationship, gets won over, gets sucked in to all of this wonderful, oh, I never had anybody like this before. Oh, I wish my dad had been like this. That kind of unconscious, all the endorphins go off and all the hormones are going crazy. You're walking on air. Oh my God, I met my Prince Charming, my soulmate, my twin flame. And then you commit. And usually it either happens when you just get engaged or when you get married. And then there's suddenly a switch. He no longer adores you. It's called the devaluation phase. So it's infatuation. Something happens where the commitment happens, then it starts the devaluation. Suddenly he teases you all the time. You know, oh, you start have an itch. Oh, do you have fleas? Something like that. So you don't think much of it, but it's kind of annoying. Then it can escalate because they really devalue you. You know, it's like the chase is what's important. I got it. I don't need it. I don't want it. I just wanted that high, the supply.
Mm-hmm.
And supply is emotion mixed with attention.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting all the supply because this is what they live on. And I can describe what he's going through at the same time after I'm done with what happens with her. And then there's the big exit, the big drop. I don't want this anymore. I found somebody else. I'm leaving. Okay. And that's usually how it goes. And then the person who's had that happen to them is deeper than devastated. It's like somebody just tore their heart apart and they don't know how they're going to go on.
Yeah. And, you know, one thing I wanted to ask you about regarding this, and again, you're using the male female roles just as an example. It can apply to anybody, anything. But if they did, like if the woman wanted to go get therapy, like, can we go to couples therapy? Then he would most likely charm the therapist, and the therapist would think there's something wrong with her.
You got it. That's the reason they go, because they get supply from winning over the therapist against the wife. See, I'm right. And once they get that, they leave. They don't stay in therapy.
That's interesting.
Because they think they're better than everyone else.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I wanted to interject here too, that I had someone do the love bombing on me as a friend years ago. They reached out and just compliments all over the place, and we became fast friends. And I saw red flags kind of early on, and I stayed in it. And about a year later, this person just kind of dropped off, which was good because I realized what was happening at the time. And I thought, I don't even want to be in this friendship anymore. And fortunately, they went away. But just as an example, it doesn't always have to be a romantic relationship. It can be like you had a father, I had another family member, I had this friend. It can be a boss. And so you were going to go into what happens with the man, because I was going to ask you, how can someone recognize if they're in this kind of relationship, but if there are classic signs or characteristics or situations? And it sounds like you're going to kind of tell us that with the guy's side of it.
Well, narcissism is on a spectrum. So it starts off where you've got somebody who's selfish but harmless. And then the worse it gets, then they become what's called narcissistic personality disorder. Now that's very rigid and doesn't change. So anybody who's diagnosed with that, therapy will do no good. Okay. Those people are just completely self-motivated. Okay. They don't really have much of a conscience. They don't have any empathy. They can do whatever they want. They think they're better than everybody else. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then it further escalates into what's called a sociopath or a malignant narcissist. Now that person is cruel. That's the big difference. They're cruel. So they'll do things they get their supply from being mean to people and playing tricks on people and having people conned and take their money and be married to somebody, but they're married to 5 other people and, that kind of thing. Okay. And they have a real cruel streak. Sometimes they were diagnosed when they were teenagers with antisocial personality disorder, and then it evolves into this. So of course, the last bad thing that it could possibly be on the spectrum is a psychopath. And we're talking to Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Okay. So it could fall anywhere. And sometimes it's hard to know if you're, getting into a relationship with somebody. Are they just in love with me, or are they love bombing me? Can I trust them? Or, and if you don't know anything about this, you're going to go in with your eyes wide open and wide shut, really, and not know what you're getting hit with. But if you have some idea of what this is, you can go in with a clearer head and hopefully make good choices. So for the man in that scenario that I said before about the bell curve there, is they'll start off love bombing, thinking, I'm going to try to get as much information as I can from this person so that I can mimic them, because I don't know what it feels like to be in love, but I can mimic what they're doing.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy.
And the more information I have, the more I can use it against them later if I need it, right? So the woman's giving all this information about herself and her family and who's this and who's that and what's happened in her life, and he's taking all of this in, and he's watching to see how she emotes, because he doesn't know how to do that. He doesn't know how to look sad, to be sad. He doesn't know how to feel. The only thing that narcissists feel is anger and resentment and jealousy. So anger and jealousy, that's it. Everything else is flat. So he's taking in all this information and he's going, oh, I'm just going to make her love me and really bring her in. And I love this. I'm getting so much supply. Look how she adores me. Isn't this wonderful? And then I'm going to hold back a little bit and not be so present one day. And she starts to get confused. What's wrong? Where are you going? What are you talking about? He gaslights her. It must be you. It's not me. I'm here. What are you talking about? Right? So he starts with these little maneuvers and tactics, and he will go in and out of being sweet and loving to being shitty. And what happens is the woman's very confused, because this is what's called intermittent reinforcement, which is the strongest reinforcement that you can do. When you go to Las Vegas and you put money in the slot machine, you're reinforcing it and then when you win, you're hooked.
Wow. What an amazing analogy. Oh my God.
So you lose, win, I'm hooked.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? I want to interject one quick thing here, because one of the things you said, it reminded me of The Rules. Remember The Rules? That book, The Rules. Actually, no, that wasn't The Rules. It was from one of the Mars and Venus books. Because I just want to clarify this, because in a healthy relationship, men, and just clarify this for me, men can tend to withdraw if they're upset about something, and women usually chase after them. What's wrong? And from what I have read and what I understand, they need to be left alone, go into their cave to kind of figure it out. And then they'll come back when they feel better, when they figured it out. And that's a completely different thing than this kind of pulling away, yes. Correct?
Yes. This is, I'm going to pull away to make this happen.
Okay.
Their MO is always, what can I get out of this? So usually he finds a woman to get the supply, or to get money, con them, or to get sex. It's one of those three. And there's different types. It's a whole nother
interview.
It is, really. Oh my gosh. All right. So he's gathering the information and he's going in and out of being nice, and she's getting confused and she's bringing it up. And instead of saying, let's talk about it, he'll say, it's her, you're crazy, nothing's happening. So she gets more and more confused. And then they get married and she's so happy and everything. And then he starts going down because he's got her. He doesn't care about her anymore. He's bored now. They get bored very easily. So I'm going to go to somebody else and get supply, because I've already gotten this supply. I've gotten everything I could get. She adores me. What else could I get? Time to find somebody else.
Well, let me ask you, if people stay in a relationship like that, like if a narcissist doesn't leave because I know of a situation where there's a narcissist and the spouse, I call them their minion because they just do whatever they want. They agree with everything. They're totally in love. And this person really isn't, but they've stayed there a long time. And maybe there is stuff on the side that I'm not aware of, but what would you suggest if someone's been in a relationship or in a relationship where the other person's not leaving, but they recognize this treatment? What would you suggest to somebody who realizes they're in a relationship like this?
Get a therapist who understands this.
Okay. And full circle. Yeah. And okay, well, you know what? Let's approach this from a different angle. What if it's a family member? Because I want to ask about family member, and what if it's a work situation? What if it's a family member? You can't, I mean, I know what I've done. I've set boundaries, but what else can they do?
Walk away.
Yeah.
You see, if say it's a mother, okay, could be a brother, could be anybody, but let's just say the significant one is the mother,
Mm-hmm.
the most significant one. And she's a narcissist. And I get calls all the time. I have clients all over who have this issue where it's very hard you can't be honest because they either burst into tears or get angry. So so they can't be themselves, and they have to walk on eggshells and appease the person, or the consequences are major, and they don't want to go through that. So they'll put up with it, and then one day it'll get so bad for them that they'll go get help, and they'll get the support they need in order to set boundaries, either try to set boundaries and have a very superficial relationship, or don't have a relationship at all.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's so many people who have that attitude, oh, it's family. But sometimes your family is not good for you, and you have to find a soul family that understands and loves and accepts you. And, you know, my requirements for a relationship these days are I need to be loved, respected, and appreciated.
Perfect.
If I don't have that, I'm out. So I think people need to understand that you don't have to stay in that relationship. And what I do with my clients and in my program is you can set those boundaries with love. It's not an FU kind of thing.
Right.
There's a lot of forgiveness work that needs to be done, but you don't want any of that anger if you do walk away from somebody to come back to you, because you and I understand the energetic aspect of everything as well. And that's a component, because you don't want to hang on to that anger and resentment when you're kind of pushing. You want to set the boundaries and say, I'm going to send you love from over here. Even if you can't love them, if that's too much of a stretch, you can send love from over here. But it's okay to leave if it's a family member and just cut ties.
The reason it's so hard for a woman to leave a narcissistic relationship that I described with the love bombing and everything is a thing called cognitive dissonance. What happens is they discover the person's a narcissist after maybe many years, and they've got two sides of them right now. One says, but he was like this. He's got this loving side. He's so sweet and wonderful. And the other side saying he's an ass. He's dangerous. Get out, right? And it's hard to put the two together, and it causes a lot of suffering. And so it usually takes, they say the average is like 7 times to try to leave a narcissistic romantic relationship. Yeah.
But the point is that they keep trying and getting the help and the support that they need. Because I've also heard that narcissists will isolate them.
Yes.
From their family and friends, so that they're really alone.
Yes. That's true. They do.
Yeah. That's so scary. And the other thing I've heard is that narcissists are always the hero or the victim in their own story. Like, I did this, I am that. Or, well, you're not taking care of me anymore. You're pulling away. You're being mean to me.
That's right.
So what would you suggest if somebody realizes, because you just said it takes about 7 times. Well, you said find a therapist. So what about in between therapy sessions? How can they take care of themselves when they're still in the situation, in the process of trying to figure out how to get out?
Well, this is a delicate place because it depends on if they think they will be in danger if they leave. So the first step is assessing with the therapist, is this a safe thing to do? Do you feel like you're going to be hurt? Do you feel like a family member is going to be hurt? How dangerous is he? Has he ever hit you before? Things like that. So that would determine, how to go about it. I mean, worst case scenario, you'd have to go to a woman's shelter and hide for however long.
Yeah. And I think the majority of women are probably not I mean, there are women who are in that situation, but I feel like we're addressing more just the realizing what's happening and I need to leave. And there's hopefully not a feeling of fear for their life, but just, that need, because there's going to be a negative reaction no matter what. There's always going to be that pushback of how dare you and all that.
That's right. They can't fathom how somebody would want to leave them. So they get indignant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It just blows my mind that this is so prevalent and they just kind of live in a different world. They kind of live in their own little fantasy world. Like you just said, they can't fathom that someone would leave because they're not even acknowledging the treatment that they're inflicting on that person.
Because they don't have introspection.
Yeah. And there's actually something wrong in the brain with these people, right? It's not just a personality. I mean, it says narcissistic personality disorder, but there's something in the brain that's a little off, correct?
It can be. I wouldn't say it's always that way. And again, it depends on where they are down on the spectrum, but I definitely believe down at the far end, there's something different in the brain. But I think that they say that nobody knows for sure how it happens, but they think that somebody has to have a very big trauma happen before age 5. It could be a separation from a parent that they're attached to. It can be a death of a parent. It could be trauma in the family. Opposite of what most people believe, narcissists really don't like themselves. Mm. They have a very, very weak ego. And they really loathe themselves. And so in order to live with that, they have to concoct a whole story around themselves that they're better than everybody and look what I can get and look what I can do and everyone's weaker and I know better. And really that's a defense against how insecure they are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everything that you're saying, I'm like, Is it possible that people have something happen a little later in life that they could become like this?
Yes. It's usually around 5. It can go up to 10. It can go down.
But not as an adult, like something happens or a teenager. Could someone go through something as a teenager and it's usually earlier?
It's earlier.
Okay. Wow.
It's in the very early developmental attachment phase of, they don't attach to their parent. Maybe the parent's a narcissist, so they can't attach. Maybe they, something happened, so they're going through a divorce or whatever it is. They don't have an attachment, so they don't get attached to anyone.
This is such a fascinating topic. We could talk about this for hours. And I feel like we might need to have another follow-up interview later to go into more depth on other things. Oh, you know what? But let me ask you real quickly at work. If someone is dealing with a narcissist at work, it's a whole other thing if it's a boss or just a coworker, but do you have any advice for anybody dealing with a narcissist at work?
That can be tricky. It depends on if it's a peer or if it's somebody that you work for.
Let's say it's a boss.
Well, I mean, if it's too intolerable, you leave.
Yeah, and hopefully they can do. I think some people feel like, oh my God, I can't, the money, blah, blah, blah. But your peace of mind and your sanity and your well-being are worth more than whatever salary you're making. And
because it wears you down.
Yeah.
And you become an empty shell of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships like this, they're vampires. emotional vampires. So they suck that out of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just in general, if people recognize they're in this kind of relationship, they should set boundaries. And if that isn't enough, they should leave and
You
protect
mean in a work situation?
any situation, because we've covered romantic relationship, family, work. You need to set boundaries. And if the boundaries aren't being respected or that's not enough for you, you
Right.
need to do whatever you can to get away, correct?
Well, let me just say one thing about setting boundaries with a narcissist. It's not easy, especially if you're divorcing. But it's not easy. But the thing is, they railroad over boundaries. They really don't hear them. So they usually have to be pretty solid and severe. Like, if you start talking to me like this, I'm walking out the door, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or I'll come over as long as we don't talk about such and such, whatever might be a trigger, but really stick to it. And if you don't, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
Over and over until they get it, because they don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, I know, because they know best. Oh, well, you've given me and everybody watching so much great information, Fiona, and I'm so grateful for this, because this is a really heavy topic and it has come to the forefront in the past few years. And I know that you're not taking on clients anymore. So where can people find a therapist or find information or support if they feel like they are in this kind of relationship with a narcissist?
Well, the first thing I would do is Google it. Google therapists that work in this field or support groups for this, whatever, and see if they can get something. Maybe outside of the United States, there might be an organization that specializes in different countries. I don't know. So that's one idea. That's what I would do. If they're in the US, there's a website by a woman named Dr. Carol McBride. She wrote a book called Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Healing Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers. And it came out quite a few years ago now, but it's very, very big in the field. She's got a website called willieverbegoodenough.com. It'll say find a therapist.
Okay.
She's got different therapists across the country. I don't think every single state, but a lot of states that have therapists that work in this field. Okay.
I'll find the link and I'll put that down below.
Okay. And there's another woman named Tina Swithin, and she went through a horrendous marriage with a narcissist and wrote a book about it called One Mom's Battle. Fascinating, easy to read. You just page turner. You can't believe what she's going through to get away from this man and have her children not go there. It was awful. So she's amazing. And she wrote another book called The Narc Decoder, which if he says this, it means this. So, great. So onemomsbattle.com. And she also has a section where you can find a therapist. And so she's got several, I don't know how many states she covers, but quite a few.
Okay, perfect.
There's also a book for people who aren't sure whether they're dating a narcissist that I find really helpful, called How to Spot a Dangerous Man Before You Get Involved.
Oh boy, that's very descriptive. That sounds like a book that a lot of women need. I'm going to put all these links in the description below so people can do the research. And again, if you are not in the US, Google narcissistic personality disorder therapist. There's most likely somebody in your area who can help you with this, I hope. But those resources are great. Thank you so much for sharing those, Fee. And just thank you for being here and sharing your story and your experience and your knowledge and your information. It's so incredibly valuable. I think it's going to help a lot of people, especially a lot of women. And I'm just so grateful for you, first of all, just being you and for being my friend, and also for the work you do and being such a big part of my life for so long.
Well, mutual admiration society.
Thank you, Fee.
And if anybody has any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm going to put your website in the description below as well. Even though you're not taking on new clients, there's valuable information there and your contact information is there.
Right, great, perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you all so much for joining us again today. I'll be back with more inspiring interviews with amazing women. So remember to subscribe here on YouTube. And if you'd like to join the community and get free resources to support your self-care, jump over to my website, TanaMarshall.com, and take the self-care boundary quiz. Perfect for this topic today. Find out how well you prioritize your well-being and sign up to be notified about upcoming events and programs. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.